My name is Lucas, and this is Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry had never believed he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still first-year Gryffindors only had potions with Slytherin, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons will be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin will be learning together. Typical, said Harry. I always wanted to do to make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learning flying lessons more than anything else. You don't know that you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron. You don't know that you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron. And reasonably, anyway, I know Malfoy's always going on about how good he is at Quidditch. I bet that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did not talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly at first years, never getting on the house Quidditch teams, and told long, peaceful stories that always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles and helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he'd spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about that time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old bedroom. Everyone from Wizarding family talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Den Thomas, who shared their dormitory, about soccer. Ron couldn't see what was so exciting about the game with only one ball, where no one was allowed to fly. Harry caught Ron prodding Dean's roster of West Ham's soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandma had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she'd had a good reason, because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents even with both feet on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost nervous about flying. Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of book. Not that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all convinced with flying tips she'd gotten out of the library book, Quidditch Through the Ages. Neville was hanging on to her every word, despite for everything might help him hang on to his broomstick letter. But everybody else was pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Hagrid's notes, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's eagle was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opens gloatingly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl bought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. It's a remember ball, he explained. Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight, and then at the end it turns red. Oh, his face fell, because the remember all had suddenly glowed scarlet. You've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he had forgotten when Draco Malfoy was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the remember ball out of his hands. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot a trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. What's going on? Malfoy's got my remember ball, Professor. Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the remember ball back on the table. Just looking, he said, and sloped away with the Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry and Ron and the other Gryffindor hurried down to the front steps onto the ground for their first flying lessons. It was a clear, breezy day. and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the forbidden forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and there were 23 broomsticks lying neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school brooms, saying that some of them start to vibrate if you flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left, or they always flew slightly to the right. Their teacher, Madam Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are you all waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced down at his broom. It was an old and some of them twigs stuck by odd angles. "Stick out your right hand over the broom," called Madam Hooch, "and at the front, and say, 'Up!'" "Up!" everybody shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger had simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms, like horses, could tell when we're afraid, thought Harry. There were a quaver in Neville's voice that said it too clearly he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madam Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows of correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing this for years. "Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground hard," said Madam Hooch. "Keep your broom steady, rise for a few feet, and come straight back down, leaning forward slightly on my whistle. 3, 2... But Neville, nervous and jumpy and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madam Hooch's lips. "Come back, boy!" she shouted. But Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face look down at the ground, falling away, saw his grass slip sideways off the broom, and then wham! A big thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher and started to drift lazily toward the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madam Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as a hiss. "Broken wrist," Harry heard her mutter. "Come on, boy, it's all right. Up you get." She turned to the rest of the class. "None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear." Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madam Hooch, who had her arms around him. No sooner were out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. "Did you see his face? The great lump?" The other Slytherin joined in. "Shut up, Malfoy," snapped Parvati Paddle. "Ooh, sticking up for Longbottom," said Pansy Parkinson. "Hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Parvati." "Look," said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the grass. Is that stupid thing Longbottom's grandson?" The Remember All glittered in the sun as he held it up. "Give that here, Malfoy," said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. "I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree?" "Give it here!" Harry yelled, but Malfoy leapt on to his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could have flied well. hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak. He called, "Come on, get it, Potter!" Harry grabbed his broom. "No!" shouted Hermione Granger. "Madam Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all in trouble." Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the ground. Up, soared in the air, rushed through his hair. His robes whipped out behind him, and in a rush of fierce joy he realized he'd found something he could do without being taught. This was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take even higher. He heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground, and an admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. "Give it here," Harry called, "or I'll knock you off that broom." "Oh, yeah?" said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry knew something what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly with both hands and shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. "No Crabbe and Goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy," Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. "Catch it if you can," he shouted, and then threw the glass ball high into the air and straight back down to the ground. Harry saw as in slow motion the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall down. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. The next second he was gathering in a step racing a ball. Wind whistled and his ears mingled with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hands a foot from caught, just in time to pull his broom straight, and toppled gently onto the grass with the Remember-All clutched safely in his fist. "Harry Potter!" His heart sank faster than he dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got to his feet, trembling. "Never in all my time in Hogwarts." Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses filled. "How dare you? You might have broken your neck." "It wasn't his fault, Professor." "Be quiet, Miss Patel." "But Malfoy..." "That's enough. Mr. Weasley, Potter, follow me now." Harry caught a sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly into Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled, but he just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking. He had to jog to keep up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bag in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on their doorstep? Up on the front steps of the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word. She wrenched open the doors and marched along the corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was talking to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled, but Harry'd stay as his gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the other brooms becoming wizards while he stumped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped inside a classroom and opened the door, poking inside her head. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick, could I borrow wood for a moment?" "Wood?" said Harry, bewildered. Was wood a cane she was going to use on them? But Wood turned out to be a person, a burly 50-year-old boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. "Follow me, you two." Professor McGonagall and they marched up to the corridor. Wood, looking curiously at Harry. And here. Professor McGonagall pointed toward the classroom, which except everybody was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on the blackboard. Out, Peeves, she barked. Peeves threw the chalk into a bin, watched clang loudly, and swooped out cruising. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned his face to the boy. Potter, this is Oliver Wood. I found you a seeker. Wood's expressions changed from a puzzlement delight to Are you serious, Professor? Absolutely, said Professor McGonagall crisply. This boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. What was your first time on a broomstick, Potter? Harry nodded slightly. He didn't have any clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be expelled, and some of the feeling started coming back into his legs. He caught that thing in his hand. Was about 50 foot. Professor McGonagall told Wood he'd even scratch himself. Charlie and Weasley couldn't have done it. Wood was now looking as though all of his dreams had come true at once. Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter? He asked excitedly. Wood's captain of Gryffindor team. Professor McGonagall explained. He's just the build for a seeker, too, said Wood, now walking around Harry, starting at him. Light, speedy, we'll have to get a decent broom, Professor. A Nimbus 2000. Clean sweep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore and see if we can't bend the first-year rule. Heaven knows we need a better team than last year. Flat in that last match by Slytherin. I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks. Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses. Harry wanted to hear is training hard. Potter might change their mind about punishing you. Then she suddenly smiled. Your father would have been proud, she said. He was an excellent Quidditch player. You're joking. It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened. When you left the grounds with Professor McGonagall, Ron had a piece of steak and a kidney pie halfway into his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. Seeker? He said. But first years never. You must be the youngest house player in about a century, said Harry, shoveling pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon. Wood told me. Ron was so impressed, he just sat there, gasped at Harry. I start training next week, said Harry. Only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. Well done, said George in a low voice. Wood told us we're on the team too. We're the beaters. I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year, said Fred. We haven't won since Charlie left, but this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Fred is almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to get to Lee. Jordan reckons he's found a new secret passageway out of the school. But it's the one behind the statue of Georgery Smerry that we found our first week. See ya. Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having a last meal, Potter. When are you getting to the train back to Muggles? You're a lot braver now than you're back on the ground and you've got your little friends with you, said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little Crabbe and Goyle, but as High's table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. I'd take you on any time of my own, said Malfoy. Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel. Wands only. No contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's duel before, I suppose? Of course he has, said Ron, wheeling around. I'm his second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe, he said. Midnight, all right? We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. "What is a wizard's duel?" said Harry. "What do you mean you're my second?" "Well, a second there is to take over your die," said Ron casually, getting started on his last cold pie. Catching the look on Harry's face, he added quickly, "But only people die in proper duels. You know, with real wizards. The most you and Malfoy will be able to do is send sparks at each other. Neither of you know enough magic to do any real damage." I bet he expected to refuse anyway, and if I wave my wand and nothing happens, throw it away, punch him in the nose, Ron suggested. "Excuse me?" They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. "Can't a person eat in peace?" said Ron. Hermione ignored him to speak to Harry. "I couldn't help you overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying." "Bet you could," Ron muttered. "And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the points you'll lose. Gryffindor, if you're caught, and you're bound to be, it's really selfish of you, and it's really none of your business," said Harry. "Goodbye, Ron." All the same time, it wasn't what you call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought as he lay much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice, such as, "If he tries to curse you, you'd better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them." There was a very good chance that they were going to get caught by Filch or Mr. Norris, and he was pushing luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered. At last, "We better go." They pulled on their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down the spiral staircase, and into the Gryffindor common room. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They almost reached the portrait hole when a voice spoke from his chair their nearest. "I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry." A lamp flickered, and it was Hermione Granger, wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. "You!" said Ron fiercely. "Go back to bed." "I almost told your brother," Hermione snapped. "Percy, he's perfect. He'd put a stop to this." Harry couldn't believe anyone could be so interfering. "Come on," he said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose, I mean. "Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup again. And you'll lose all points I got from Professor McGonagall knowing about switching spells. Go away." "All right, but I warned you. You just remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. But what they didn't find out. Hermione Granger had turned the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside, found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone to a nightmare visit, and Hermione was locked out of the Gryffindor tower. "Now what am I gonna do?" she asked cheerily. "What's your problem?" said Ron. "We've got to go. We're going to be late." They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up to them. "I'm coming with you," she said. "No, you're not. Do you think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Filch to catch me? If he finds all three of us, I'll tell him the truth, that I was trying to stop you and you can back me up." "You've got some nerve," said Ron loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Harry sharply. I heard something. It was some sort of snuffling. Mrs. Norris? Breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris. It was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but he jerked suddenly awake. They crept nearer. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. Keep your voice down, Neville. The password's big pig snout. But it won't help you to know. The fat lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Said Harry. Fine, said Neville, showing them. Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute. Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got to be somewhere. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Neville, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay here alone. The Bloody Baron's been passed twice already. Ron looked at his watch, then glared fiercely at Hermione and Neville. If either of you get us caught, I'll never rest until I've learned that the curse of Boyge's Quirrell told us about it used on you. Hermione opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of Boogie's. But Harry hissed at her to be quiet. She beckoned them all forward. They flittered across a long corridor stripped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Harry expected to run into Filch or Mrs. Norris. They'd speed up in a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed toward the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there yet. Their crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shield plates, and statues winked silver and gold in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on the doors. At neither end of the room, Harry took out a wand in case Malfoy leapt in. They started at once. Minutes crept by. He's late. Maybe he's chickened out, Ron whispered. Then a noise in the room made them jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when they heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. Sniff around, my sweet. They might be lurking in the corner. It was Filch speaking to Mr. Norris, horror-struck. Waved madly at the other three to follow him. As possibly, they scurried silently toward the door. Filch's voice, Neville's robes, had barely whipped around the corner when they heard Filch enter the trophy room. They're in here somewhere, they heard him mumble, probably hiding. This way! Harry mouthed to the others, began to creep down a long gallery full of suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly out a fright and squeak and broke into a run, tiptoed, grabbed Ron around the waist, and the pair of them toppled right into a suit of armor. The clanging and crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. Run! Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was falling. Then another. Harry in the lead, without any idea where they were or where they were going. They ripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway. Hurtled along it, came out the nearest Charms classroom, which they know was miles from the trophy room. I think we've lost him, Harry panted. Leaning against the cold wall and wiping his forehead, Neville was bent double, wheezing, sputtering. I told you. Hermione gasped, clutching the stitch in her chest. told you. "We got to get back to Gryffindor Tower," said Ron, "quickly as possible." "Malfoy tricked you," Hermione said to Harry. "You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew something was going to be in the trigger-free room. Malfoy must have ripped him off." Harry thought that she was probably right, but he wasn't going to tell her that. "Let's go." He wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when a doorknob rattled, and something came shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught a sight of them in a sequel of delight. "Shut up, Peeves, please. You'll get us thrown out," Peeves crackled. "Wandering around at midnight, ickle fristies. Tut, tut, tut. Naughty, 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 you'll get caughty." "Not if you don't give us away, Peeves. Please." "Should I tell Filch?" "I should," said Peeves in a slanty voice, but his eyes glittered wickedly. "It's for your own good, you know." "Get out of the way," snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was a bit. "Students out of beds!" Peeves bellowed. "Students out of bed, down to the Charms corridor!" Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives right to the end of their corridor, where they slammed into a door, and it was locked. "This is it," Ron mourned as they pushed helplessly at the door. "We're done for. This is the end." They could hear footsteps. Filch running as fast as he could toward the Peeves shouts. "Oh, move over!" Hermione snarled and grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, "Early armor." The lock clicked and the door swung open. They piled through. It shut quickly, passaged their ears against it, listening. "Which way did they go, Peeves?" Filch was saying. "Quick, tell me. Say, please. Don't mess with me, Peeves." "Now, where did they go?" "Shan't say it, nothing, if you say please." "The Peeves?" said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. "All right, please." "Nothing." "Ha ha. Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. Ha ha ha." And they heard the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. "He thinks this door is locked," Harry whispered. "I don't think we'll be okay." "Get off, Neville." For Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of Harry's bathrobe for the last minute. "What?" Harry turned around, saw quite clearly what for a moment, and was sure he walked into the nightmare. This was too much on top of everything that happened so far. They weren't in a room, as he had supposed. They were in a corridor, the forbidden corridor, on the 3rd floor, and now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of the monstrous dog, a dog that had filled the whole space between ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling mad eyes, their noses twitching and quivering in that direction, and 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes from yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, 6 eyes staring at them. And Harry knew it was the only reason they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise. But it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistaking. Those thunderous growls meant Harry groped for the doorknob between Filch and Dearth. And they almost flew back into the corridor, which means they must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else, because they didn't see him anywhere, but they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the 7th floor. "Where have you all been?" she asked, looking at their bathrobes hanging on their shoulders. and their flushed, sweaty faces. "Never mind that. Pig snout, panted Harry. And the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trampling into armchairs. It was a while before said anything. Neville indeed looked as if he'd never speak again. "What do you think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in school?" said Ron. "If any dog needs exercise, that one does." Hermione had got both her breath and her bad temper back again. "You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you?" she snapped. "Didn't you see what it was standing on?" "The floor?" I suggested. "I wasn't looking at its feet. I was too busy with its heads." "No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something." She stood up, glaring at them. "I hope you're pleased with yourself. We could have all been killed or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed." Ron started after, his mouth open. "No, we don't mind. You think we dragged her along, wouldn't you?" But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about. As he climbed into bed, the dark was guarding something. What had Hagrid said? Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except perhaps Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out what the grubby little package with the vault from Vault 713 was. And that is the end of Chapter 9 and Harry Potter Philosopher's and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I'll see you for Chapter 10.